Did you guys see that JJK got a 6 from IGN? Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2 Part 2 review. Cool fight scenes can't make up for a meandering story. See, first up, I don't know what they mean by Season 2 Part 2. Like, did they only review the last 12 episodes and not the first 12? Like, are they not taking into context, like, the rest of Season 2? I'm not too sure what Part 2 means. I think Part 2 is specifically Shibuya. Oh, so they don't take in, like, the hidden inventory arc? But I kind of want to read through this. Oh my god, they actually wrote a decent amount. I was expecting just, like, one paragraph. Okay, let's read it. The much-anticipated adaptation of the Shibuya incident arc has finally ended, and it delivered non-stop action, shocking deaths, and huge changes to the world of Jujutsu Kaisen. But is that enough? Though the fights are handsomely animated, and there are some moments of visual brilliance, the arc ends up being nonsensical fight after nonsensical fight without much emotion in the storytelling. Nonsensical fight. I wonder what they mean by that. Like, the matchups didn't make any sense. The reason they're fighting makes no sense. Like, I'm not too sure what they're trying to get at by calling them nonsensical fights. I mean, there was a goal in mind, right? Like, the sorcerers wanted to save Gojo, and then all of the villains wanted them to not save Gojo, and they wanted to wreak havoc. Like, I feel like it's not exactly nonsensical. Like when I think of nonsensical, I think of like an arcade fighter. Like, you know, you're popping on Street Fighter, you're hopping into the tower, and then it's like, hey, you're fighting this random CPU. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I think of when I think of nonsensical fights. I have no clue what they're trying to get at here. Like, this is a diss somehow. Like, this is a negative. There's a cheapness to many of the deaths, and even though the story arrives at some big changes, it does so after a meandering story. Cheap deaths. I wouldn't say they're cheap. See, when people complain about the deaths of JJK, it's because people die right when you begin to like them. So you could look at certain deaths like Nanami, for example, and you could say, wow, he could have been much better in the later seasons. He could have developed more. He could have fulfilled his dream of going to Malaysia. And then we have the Zenin guy. I forgot his name. Sorry. The grandpa alcoholic man. Yeah, like he got introduced and then he died. And it's like, yeah, like it's unfortunate, but it's nice that there's actual stakes to it. I'd rather we have cheap deaths, as they want to call it, rather than no deaths. Don't get me started on Nobara because, you know, I am on the copium train where I think she's still alive. But yeah, we'll save that one for a different day. Complaining about the meandering story is also another weird one. Because if you just look at part 2 of season 2, if you just look at Shibuya, it's like, yeah, it's meandering. Like, you could say that if you pretend like season 1 and season 2 part 1 doesn't exist. You know what I mean? This is like me going to Naruto, the Sasuke retrieval arc, and only looking at the part where we're trying to retrieve Sasuke and call it a meandering story. Because there's nothing but fights there. Oh, there's nonsensical fight after nonsensical fight. There's a cheapness in some of the deaths. It's like you could say this about any series if you just only single out the fighting parts of it. It's like they're not taking the grand scheme of the JJK story at all. I feel like this is such a bad opener already. You know, they're not exactly stepping out here with their right foot forward. The first season of Jujutsu Kaisen had a great mix of comedy and action with horror influences, don't forget the jump scares, guys, that gave it a unique aesthetic. Then, the first half of the second season came in with devastating character drama that deepened the world and lore, and made what was a relatively small villain into a fascinating and complex character. The Shibuya arc incident, unfortunately, seems to misunderstand that it wasn't the action alone, but the sum of Jujutsu Kaisen's part that made this show great. Was there not character development in the latter parts of Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2? Like, I mean, Yuji grew, right? Am I wrong when I say that? Like, the MC definitely grew. I'd say even the villains grew, actually. Like, at their time of death, they changed a little bit. You know, they had realizations. I'm not too sure if they were maybe watching this with their eyes closed. I don't know. Problems begin with the awkward chronology of the arcs. It's been 4 years since we last saw Yuji and his friends. And the moment we are reunited with them, they're separated into dozens of teams sent to respond to a full-scale attack by cursed spirits in the Shibuya ward of Tokyo. Oh, they're talking about like from season 1 to the Shibuya arc. Like 4 years since we had like season 1. If you read this first sentence here, it almost sounds like we're watching Steins Gate. Given how much weight and screen time are devoted to the fight scenes, it's reassuring that they look magnificent for the most part. wait, do they not like something? This would be a good time to mention the allegations of crunch and unfair compensation recently leveled against JJK studio MAPPA, with one animator director going so far as saying in a now deleted post that one Shibuya incident episode made it to air as 30% of the intended vision. Yes, okay, this one is a problem. MAPPA and the way they, deal with workers isn't exactly the best. They're not getting any gold stars. But it seems like they're using this as a way to bring down the show's rating, which doesn't exactly make sense, right? And the reason I'm making that assumption is because they say everything looks great for the most part, as if like this is the negative, right? Positive, negative. That's how I'm kind of viewing it. Some cuts in several of the arc's episodes do indeed look unfinished. So this is a myth. As far as the director saying that 30% of the intended vision was there, they're talking about like their actual vision. They're not talking about like, oh, it was only 30% done. No. They wanted to do much more with it. The scenes that we got were finished. So saying that they look unfinished, at this point, you're kind of just dissing. You're really just dissing their finished product. You're dissing the parts they took pride in, like Todo and Yuji's fight against Mahito. This is no criticism of the animation team, who gave it their all to pull off plenty of visual spectacles. Particularly great is the fight between Jogo and Sukuna, a Shibuya incident highlight. It has a stunning use of proportions, fiery imagery, and color, giving the impression of a clash between titans that goes beyond our comprehension of physics. With so much combat and so little breathing room, the action becomes a slog, which is the last thing you want out of your battle shonen. Yeah. I like how they acknowledge that it's a battle shonen, and then they say that there's so much combat with so little breathing room, the action becomes a slog. See, this is the problem with only reviewing part 2 of season 2. Like, yeah, part 2 of season 2 is all fighting for the most part. If you want the story, part 1 is for you, brother. Like, it's build up. It's not like there was a long hiatus between part 1 and part 2 either. All you need out of Jujutsu Kaisen is people punching each other through a ton of VFX. This might not be so bad. It's when you can't tell what the point of a fight is, that's the issue. When you can't tell what's the point of a fight. What fight are they referring to? Was there a fight that didn't make any sense at all? Okay, let's look at the battles real quick. Just to refresh our memory. Sukuna versus Mahoraga. He needed to do this to save Megumi. Not nonsensical, it had a reason. Yuji and Todo versus Mahito. Mahito wanted to destroy everybody. He wanted to take down Yuji and destroy humanity. I'd say that fight is pretty meaningful. Sukuna versus Jogo. So Sukuna promised Jogo that he would kill everyone in Shibuya if Jogo landed a single hit on him. They established that before they started fighting. That was the whole purpose of the fight. And then Toji versus Dagon. See, this one, if you want to call a fight nonsensical, I feel like this one would fit the bill. Okay, there we go. Woo-hoo! 1 out of 8 fights. Sure, it's a little bit nonsensical. Toji was literally like a reanimated corpse from Naruto here. Like, he had no will of his own. Actually, that's a bad way to put it. He had will, and his will was to fight. He just wanted to fight the next strongest person in front of him, which was Dagon at the time. So I guess you could call it nonsensical since, he's not exactly operating behind the wheel there, but I feel like there is still reasoning behind it. And then there are more fights here as well, but I don't want to go through these. It looks like they just listed the main ones here. The other ones, we're just going to start looking at like mini fights, which okay, I guess we'll go through them, right? Like if we're going to say all the fights have some sort of meaning, I guess we do have to go through them. What else do we have? Mei Mei and Wee Wee versus Smallpox Deity. So fighting the Smallpox Deity mattered because that is the monster that Kenjaku summoned. Mei Mei versus Niji, which is a guy that got off-screened. But again, He's a bad guy. He's working with the bad sorcerers. Like, it's hard to call these nonsensical when they're actual villains. It's not like they just show up and they're like, whoa, why are we fighting? You know what I mean? All in all, though, the JJK reviewer of IGN did a pretty bad job, in my opinion. Of course, if he thinks that season 2 is abysmal, he can have that opinion. That's fine by me. But my opinion is that his opinion is dog shit. Like, even if you wanted more story, he could have rated it a little bit better. I think 6 out of 10 is him going out of his way for rage bait. I'm gonna be honest, I love JJK, but when I think of it, it doesn't have the best story. Yeah, it doesn't have the best story. I don't think it ever tried to have a great story either. I think JJK knows exactly what it is, and the story works for what they're doing. And their fights definitely make up for the story. But to say it has, like, no story is kind of beyond me.